At some point, when things settle down, I'm going to meet with China, and I'm going to meet with Russia in particular, those two, and I'm going to say there's no reason for us to be spending almost $1 trillion on military. There's no reason for you to be spending $400 billion. China's going to be at 400 billion. We're at $1 trillion. We're going to be at close to $1 trillion. And I'm going to say we can settle this on, we can spend this on other things. We don't have to spend this on military because, and I'm going to be meeting with China. You know, we were trying to de-escalate nuclear, and I was in a position where Russia had agreed and China had agreed we were going to start, and then we had a rigged election, so that never took place. But this one was too big to rig. We won by so much that it was too big to rig.
What I've realized over the past 2 weeks is that I'm accustomed to coming on the show to talk to you guys and doing so when I'm upset about things. That's what I've realized. That's been basically the entire impetus for me to start this show, was that I was so pissed about the trajectory of things and what was going on. And then I realized that, like, oh, why am I struggling to come up with, you know, something to talk about? And it's like, oh, because I like almost everything that's happening right now. Wow. What a time to be alive. Clint is happy. I hope many of you feel the same way. But this is such a big deal, man. I mean, for Trump to talk about trilateral, not just military drawdowns, but denuclearization between Russia, China, and America is such a big deal. Such a big deal. I mean, he talks all tough, you know, tariffs all day long when it comes to everybody, but in particular China. But he realizes at the end of the day, there's no winning scenario where the U.S. and China and Russia go to war. Like, it's just not a win for anybody. And this is all I've been saying, this is all every libertarian's been saying, and any sane person has been saying for years now. It's like, this just can't happen. It can't happen. And even more stupid, why are we spending trillions of dollars on buildup for this war that just can't happen? So why do it? And he's like, yeah, that's right. Let's not do that. I couldn't be more happy. I mean, now granted, it's just rhetoric at this point. He's just saying it. The follow through will mean everything. As he said there at the end of that clip, he was in talks with China in his first presidential term, and he felt like they were really close, actually, to having an agreement to draw down on nuclear weapons, and it got derailed. Could the deep state strike back? Is the empire really going to go out without a fight, or will the empire strike back? Like, the odds are the empire is going to strike back at some point, and we don't know what that'll look like. I might theorize about that a little bit later in this episode, but in the interim, my goodness, man. I mean, such a big deal. Just to have a president saying the logical, rational thing. Like, hey, let's not have a nuclear buildup between the three largest nuclear powers in human history with the three largest militaries in human history. Let's not do it. Let's not do it. It's like, oh, rationality is back. What a miracle. He didn't stop there, though. He then went on to say this, which is even more heartening.
Have Russia back to the G7, sir?
I'd love to have them back. I think it was a mistake to throw them out. Look, it's not a question of liking Russia or not liking Russia. It was the G8. And, you know, I said, what are you doing? You guys, all you talk about is Russia, and they should be sitting at the table. I think Putin would love to be back. Obama and a couple of other people made a mistake, and they got Russia out. It's very possible that if that was the G8, you wouldn't have had the problem with Ukraine. And if I was president, you definitely wouldn't have had the problem with Ukraine. Russia would have never attacked Ukraine. But you ask a very good question, the G8. It used to be the G8, and then these people threw them out. And I was arguing with Trudeau and with numerous of the people. Actually, Prime Minister Abe, a great man from Japan, agreed with me 100%, and some of the others did too. But I got there, it was the G7, as you know. They had already been terminated. I think it would have been very helpful, and it still would be helpful to have Russia be a part of that mix. And I think if they were, I don't think you would have had the problem that you have right now.
So for those that aren't familiar with the history, the G7 consists of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US. At a time, it was the G8, in which Russia was also a member. And they essentially come up with different, security protocols and things like that. And they have conversations. It's essentially like NATO, but smaller bloc of nations. After Russia took Crimea in 2014, which they did, they were suspended from the G8, and it became the G7 in, I think it was 2018, when Russia ultimately withdrew entirely, probably with the expectation that they were going to be going to war with Ukraine in the not too distant future, or at least that was like leverage to try and threaten the West broadly, like, hey, we're serious, we're leaving the G7 or we're leaving the G8. It didn't work. And it's just such an important thing to have libertarians, including myself, have a hard time looking at the presidency as anything serious. It's like, oh, the commander in chief, sure. Like he tried to be the commander in chief last time. He tried to draw down our troops in Syria. They told him to kick rocks. So like, is he the commander in chief really, Clint? Like, I don't know. But Trump is trying to act as if he's the real president, which is something Joe Biden never did. I don't think he even pretended really, or that he was even like sentient enough to understand that he wasn't the real president of the United States. But Trump seems to be behaving as if he thinks he is and believes that he is, and he's doing everything in his power to actually act and accomplish things as if a real president with real thoughts can actually do something to change the trajectory of the world. And so far, it's working. Now, we're only 3 weeks in. A lot could change. But this is so big. This is absolutely huge. Not only a trilateral agreement to draw down not just nuclear weapons, but just the broad-based spending, which is $1 trillion annually that the U.S. spends, $300 to $400 billion that China's spending. I'm not sure how much Russia's spending. It's just such an immense waste of resources for not just Americans, but all countries. I mean, spending on military is wasteful inherently. And, you know, sure, you get some value out of it. Like it's important to not be at war. So if you have defense, maybe that diminishes the chances of war. But when you have a trilateral buildup that's happening where everyone's just building up, well, guess what? It's not just America that has a military industrial complex. Yes, we produce the most advanced weaponry in the world, as far as I know. But China also has some, and Russia has some. So as long as they're infusing $300 billion or more of their taxpayer dollars into their own military buildup, some of which is purchasing from America, I'd imagine, not much. But what that does is it creates an incentive structure by which you have these industries that pop up to fill this demand that once they're there, they don't really want to go away now, do they? Like, so do you want to have an American military industrial complex that is comparable to that of the Russian military industrial complex and China's military? Like, no, you don't want that. You don't want to have these three entrenched military industrial complexes that just drain resources, with the likely inevitable conclusion being that there is a war so that they can use their stockpiles and then have it be refilled. So this is a mandatory prerequisite step towards avoiding a war between these countries and ultimately, hopefully, a lasting peace. I cannot tell you how meaningful it is that Trump would, even though it's nothing formal, it's nothing like, oh, we've signed an agreement or anything like that, but it's just such a big deal to have a president who actually talks about it, who says it with seriousness and with a sense of optimism that maybe we don't have to go to war with Russia or China. What a novel concept. How insane is it that that's even novel? that's not just very commonplace, that wasn't standard procedure for all presidents in your lifetime. That, hey, let's avoid World War III. Like, duh, right? But that's how dark it was. That's how unbelievably led astray we were. That we had this, as I said earlier, barely sentient puppet of a human being in Joe Biden, who's just literally just marionetting him around. Like, how much money do you need, Ukraine? And for the record, this isn't a strictly partisan issue. Republicans, by and large, were all standing in line, just like the Democrats, to cast their yes votes for every new multi-billion-dollar aid package that went to Ukraine and Israel and many other places all over the world. This is bipartisan. But Trump seems to be representing a real tidal shift, a change, a desperately needed one. And that leads me into the even better news, or I guess it's not even better news. That was probably the best news we'll get today, particularly if it becomes formalized. My goodness, what a great thing to hear. But we just got RFK Jr. confirmed. The Senate has officially confirmed not just RFK Jr. as the head of HHS, but also Tulsi Gabbard as DNI. My goodness. What's really remarkable about this is that the vote tally came down on, I think, almost exact party lines, but inversed. I think this is a really revelatory thing. As you guys know, I'm sure, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. were lifelong Democrats. I mean, you don't get more Democrat, as particularly Democrat royalty, than RFK Jr. Son of RFK, nephew of JFK. He's Kennedy. The Kennedy name is probably more synonymous with the Democrat Party than even the Clintons. At least to me it is. I don't know. I have a little bit more affinity towards that family than I do the Clintons, but you can't go much lower than that. And he's just been excommunicated because he actually had some principles that, were just outside of the bounds of their extraordinarily narrow Overton window. He was like, yeah, I believe I'm right about these things. I've spent my life litigating these issues. I've studied it. I've written books on it. And I think I'm right. Now, as I've said many times, I think RFK Jr. is probably wrong about some of his I guess I wouldn't say that they're assumptions, but his hypotheses. But I think he's right about a lot of his hypotheses as well. And I think that we're going to find out in his 4-year term as head of HHS what he's right about and what he's wrong about. And I think that's good. Libertarians, me included, as always, we tend to be very skeptical of government power whatsoever, as we should be. We also tend to have very little faith that good things can happen via the government. So I want to reframe this as to how I perceive this change and why I think RFK Jr. is a good change agent.
For 20 years, I've gotten up every morning on my knees and prayed that God would put me in a position where I can end the childhood chronic disease epidemic in this country. On August 23rd of last year, God sent me President Trump. All right. And he gave me... He's now given me, he's kept every promise that he's made to me. He's kept his word in every account and gone way beyond it. I'm so grateful to you, Mr. President. A lot of people told me that I couldn't trust President Trump. I better get it in writing. And we did a handshake, and everything that he told me he was going to do, he has done. Right. And I'm so grateful to him, and I've told you before, I genuinely believe that you are a pivotal historical figure, and you are going to transform this country.
Today's episode of Liberty Lockdown is brought to you once again by our friends over at Crowd Health. Health insurance is a nightmare. I don't know if you've tried to get any sort of health care in the past few years, but it sucks. And if dealing with insurance makes it even worse, it's truly insult to injury, in my opinion. The headache of health insurance is exactly why Crowd Health was created. It's not health insurance. It's a better way to pay for healthcare through crowdfunding. So stop sending money to big insurance companies who profit off of not paying your bills and check out Crowd Health. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months by using code LOCKDOWN at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code LOCKDOWN. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code LOCKDOWN. Once you recognize that it's highly probable that the government's interference in our food supply, in our economy broadly, is creating a paradigm by which we are essentially broadly sickening ourselves, well, then it's not really government interference to stop. See what I'm saying? It's almost like abolition. It's not really about government interference as much as it is just remedying government interference that already exists. Like all of the subsidies that go towards sugar, for instance, or corn. Well, because of corn in particular is the one that really has led us astray, in my opinion, is it then made us shift from sugar to high fructose corn syrup, which was a derivative product of the corn crops, which were being subsidized because of these government programs to defend our farmers. But what did that amount to? Well, it amounted to massive uptick in diabetes and obesity. Now, there's lots of it, like, this is not all on the government. I think the other thing that libertarians do that's really bad is oftentimes we blame the government for everything. Not everything is the government's fault. We don't believe that they're capable of accomplishing much, so why would we put every bad thing on their shoulders? Obviously, that's not true either. Now, they're responsible for a hell of a lot, but not everything. And this is one that's the blame can get spread around quite equitably. It's obvious that, like, as a people, we have gone astray. We've stopped concerning ourselves with eating whole foods. We've eaten far too much mass processed foods. It's very unhealthy, and I think that the proof is in the statistics. Like, we are increasingly not just unhealthy, but deeply unhealthy, with multiple comorbidities. And we really learned that during the lockdown era, that if you were healthy, if you were the 30 to 40% of people that are genuinely healthy in this country, well, then you weren't at much risk of COVID. But if you were sitting on 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 comorbidities, high blood pressure, diabetes, emphysema, cancer, whatever, you were probably screwed. Like, that was when you were really in jeopardy. And what we learned because of our mortality rate during that period is that we were really unhealthy compared to the rest of the world. And I think that RFK Jr. arises in a time when he's really necessary, where he forced us to relook at all of this. Like, I don't know if you guys feel the same way. This is just how I feel, but I really do feel as if, like, he has made me reassess exactly what we're putting in our bodies, why we're doing it. Yes, the government's involvement, but also big business, big ag, the industry. Like, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? Now, much of the reason that they've gone so astray is because of government interference. And as I said earlier, the subsidies and things like that. Certainly the FDA didn't help with their food pyramid that just made us fat as hell. They're like, eat 25 servings of grain per day, you'll be fine. It's like, probably not advisable, but avoid fat, only have 4 to 5 of protein. That's like, that's the dangerous stuff. I mean, it was almost inverted. It was really disgusting. And the lobbyists were responsible for much of that. But the lobbyists come from the private businesses too. So this is not strictly government bad thing. This is also, like, financial interests that exist within the food production, chain of command were guilty too. Like, they have blood on their hands too. Now, I am hesitant to give, like, just a blank check to RFK Jr. because at the end of the day, he's a Democrat. He's been a Democrat for life. He's seen the light on many things, I think gun rights in particular, but that doesn't mean that he's going to be like a small government, minarchist moving forward. He's probably going to move with a fairly heavy hand. And I will be on guard for that. And I will try my best to maintain my principles as I analyze his behavior and what he does in that role. But I think that it's just obvious to me at this point that things were so fucked up that we need a major change agent. We need a almost revolutionary figure in that role, just to, even if we don't empower him to make these changes unilaterally, but just for disclosure purposes. I mean, this guy is a serious attorney. He definitely knows how to do his own research. If you've read the real Anthony Fauci, then you already know I'm telling you the truth on that. That dude had thousands of cliff notes or citations in that book. It was wild. It's obvious to me that he's capable of doing the due diligence necessary and surrounding himself with the people that will assist him in that process to find out the truth of, like, hey, where did COVID come from? Now, if you've read his book, you already know he's got a pretty firm handle on who and why and what all transpired there. But to have him with that imprimatur of authority to talk about this, not just as this, dissident Democrat who's been excommunicated, but rather the head of HHS, who's got the entire government agency, which, by the way, HHS manages an immense amount of resources, far more than it should, for the record. But because he will then have that legitimacy, I think it will force more people to consider seriously what he has to say, and particularly when he has the ability to get behind layers of secrecy, NDAs, and I don't know if he has subpoena power. I assume not, but if he has a good working relationship with Pam Bondi as AG, who knows? Maybe he can essentially serve as the conduit for the real investigatory work that's necessary to find out what the hell happened with our health agencies broadly. I think he's already got a pretty good idea, but in that position of authority, he could certainly require his subordinates to turn over the documents. And if they refuse, he's got Bondi on speed dial with the power of the president behind him too. I mean, this is exactly what we needed. I'm just being honest. I really think this is exactly what we needed. We needed someone who's actually interested in finding out the truth and stopping the origin of the sickness as opposed to just focusing on the medicines, which is obviously not fixing us, at least not always. And I think that that's really what we needed. And I think it's going to be just revelatory for a lot of people that haven't done any looking into our medical health establishment and how it functions. I think they will be jaw dropped once they realize this. Now, a lot of them are going to reject it no matter what. But I think some people will see the light, and I think it's going to be really impactful. And I hope most importantly, it'll be impactful for our children, the next generation. It's a injustice that rivals any level of criminality I've ever witnessed. That to put kids on drugs and things like that has just been terrible. I won't go into the details. You guys already know what I'm talking about, but it's crazy. So you got Bobby is head of HHS. He basically goes from, how do we put this? He goes from, quack, as they call him, to attack, dog, against the pharma industry. And then you've got Tulsi Gabbard as DNI, which she goes from no fly to DNI. Boom. I mean, this is like, don't call it a comeback. I mean, yeah, it's a comeback, man. But it's not just a comeback for them as individuals. I really feel like it's a comeback for the country. And I was thinking about this earlier, and it's like, if you're a Democrat at this point, if you're one of the few remaining semi-sane Democrats, and you're looking around and you're like, wait a second, I used to kind of like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. And now I'm forbidden from liking them. And now my representatives in the Senate vote on strict party lines against former Democrats. But I've been told that Trump intends to implement Project 2025, and he's a fascist, and he hates us, and he wants to imprison us or end our lives or worse. And he's interested in putting lifelong Democrats as the head of HHS and DNI. It has to be creating some cognitive dissonance with these folks. They have to be thinking to themselves, is the narrative about Trump true? Why would he do this? Not all of them, but just some. There's still some with some semblance of rationality that have to be thinking about this again, especially after what happened with the Biden presidency, where they just lied about his mental health. And then all of a sudden in 48 hours, he went from, right as rain to deranged. I don't know why I keep rhyming today, but that's basically what they did. They're like, this dude's sharp as a tack. And then they're like, we got to take him out back. I'm going to stop rhyming. I promise. But that's what they did. And they replaced him with Kamala. And then they lied to their supporters about Kamala and how, she's real bright too. And they're watching this and they're like, God, this lady's not that bright. Yeah, I still would prefer her over Trump, but she's obviously not bright. And then this. And now you have every Democrat voting against Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. to be at the highest levels of Trump's cabinet. I mean, there's basically nothing higher than what he just gave Bobby Kennedy. He's now the boss of the CDC, the FDA, NIH. I mean, he's the boss's boss. He's the guy for all of it. It's amazing. And I just want to reiterate, Trump didn't have to do this. Yeah, he promised it, but he didn't have to deliver. He could have just told Bobby, look, man, I don't think that the Senate's going to confirm you. So I'll give you some position in my cabinet that's not as high up, or I'll give you some influential position within HHS, not the head of it. He didn't do that. he kept to his promise. He delivered on something that I don't think that the MAHA movement broadly would have ever believed truly possible. Or if they did, it was just a hope. It was kind of like the libertarians' hope. Like, will he actually put a libertarian in his cabinet? Will he actually free Ross Ulbricht? Like, we hope, but are you going to bet on it? Probably not. Like, it was a coin flip at best, it felt like. And now you look at his deliveries on these promises and you're like, Jesus, he's doing it all. Like, all of it. I mean, tell me one thing that he's promised that he hasn't delivered on. I'm trying to think of them. I'm like, sure, he hasn't negotiated a peace in Ukraine on day one. But as you saw in this clip earlier, like, he's working on it. He's having real conversations with it. And Trump didn't just stop there.
I don't see any way that a country in Russia's position could allow them, just in their position, could allow them to join NATO. I don't see that happening. And long before President Putin, Russia was very strong on the fact that I believe that's the reason the war started. Because Biden went out and said that they could join NATO, and he shouldn't have said that. As soon as he said that, I said, you know what? You're going to have a war now, and I was right about that. This is a war that would have never happened if I were president.
But you don't think it's President Biden's fault, not President Putin? I mean, he's the one.
I think Biden is incompetent, and I think when he said that they could join NATO, I thought that was a very stupid thing to say. I thought when he said, well, it depends if it's a minor incursion. In other words, it's okay if Russia does a minor incursion. I thought that was a very foolish thing to say.
Today's episode is brought to you once again by our friends over at MyPillow. I know. How cool is this? If you are looking for not just pillows, blankets, bed sheets, slippers, anything cozy, if you want to be like Clint Russell, you want to be cozy. That's priority number one. As soon as I get home, I get cozy. If you're not cozy, you ain't living. Get cozy with MyPillow. Go to mypillow.com/lockdown, or you can call 800-803-0339. I know. I have my own personal phone number to MyPillow. How insane is that? But the easier way, for the more tech-savvy amongst us, go to mypillow.com/lockdown and check out all of their goodies. I'm telling you, you won't be disappointed. They got a lot of awesome stuff. I'm a fan. And yeah, they support the show. I support them. You support them, then you support the show. That's how it works. MyPillow.com, code LOCKDOWN. Check it out. So exactly what Scott Horton and Dave Smith and me and Tom and everybody else have been saying for the longest time. And Mearsheimer and a whole bunch of others, obviously. Yeah, it's an absurd demand of Russia to accept that their southern neighbor should be put into a military defensive pact with the leading military on earth, America. It's fucking insane. It's insane to ever think that that was at all plausible or that it would ever be accepted by the Russians, and it wasn't. So yeah, when you start to talk like that, there's consequences for really dumb fucking ideas, like adding Ukraine, one of the most corrupt nations, if not the most corrupt nation in Eastern Europe, just adding them into NATO, this military alliance that requires that if there's ever a fight between Russia and the U.S., via Article 5, that we're supposed to, defend them. There's some questions about how mandatory the defense is, if it just means that we have to provide them weaponry or if we actually have to fight on their behalf. But regardless, it puts us in a very dangerous situation. And from the Russians' perspective, an existential threat, massive threat. So yeah, they weren't going to allow for it. And Trump just gets back in the White House, and like after 4 years, I just want to really emphasize the the Biden administration with Anthony Blinken at state, they weren't talking to the Russians for years, as we were actively funding to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars their neighbor in a war. We were in a proxy war with a nuclear power, and they hung up the phone and they tore the fucking phone out of the wall. I know that's old school reference because no one has house phones anymore, but you know what I'm saying. During the Cold War, there was this red phone famously that was obviously a landline that they could pick up that was directly connected to the Kremlin, and you could have Yeltsin and Reagan or whoever talk. They got rid of that. They just didn't talk to them for years, and they continued to shovel as much money as humanly possible into this pit of despair known as Ukraine. And they weren't having conversations, and it's just like, rationality is back. All I wanted, like, It's not an assurance that because you pick up the phone and you start to talk to Putin that we don't end up in a war with them. But guess what? Far greater likelihood of us ending up in a war with Russia if we're not having a conversation with them while we armed their neighbor in an obvious proxy war against Russia right on their border. Like, duh. So this is massive. And I think this is why I've struggled to sit down and record, because I'm just so fucking thrilled with everything that's happening. This is like things I didn't think could possibly happen. He got rid of the Department of Education, for God's sakes. Like, it's basically gone. He did a full foreign aid funding freeze, aside from Israel, obviously. I mean, massive step in the right direction. He sicked Doge on USAID. Do you know how big that is? Let me explain it a little bit, because I talk a lot about, because of my preparation for that debate against Destiny a couple years ago, where I was debating the war in Ukraine, which, by the way, I was obviously fucking right. Duh. Destiny. What an idiot. But when I was preparing for that, I read Scott's entire book, like 2 years before it was even finalized. And the major takeaway I had from it was that, oh, yeah, it's our State Department that actually funds this stuff. So that's what I always talked about. I was always talking about State Department interference. I talked about Victoria Nuland a lot, or Jake Sullivan. I was like, this is a State Department operation. What I never really talked about enough, which I should have been, because I just kind of thought of them as synonymous, was that USAID, which is the United States Agency for International Development, it is not about foreign aid. Let's get that fucking clear. Is the funding mechanism for State Department. Like, that is how they actually implement their plans. So the State Department comes up with the crazy plans. They, have the phone calls with the diplomats, and they set all of the dominoes up. But then the funding mechanism to try and get the street riots and things like that going come through USAID. So for him to go after USAID is about as ballsy and as direct an attack on the real deep state, like the real military industrial complex, the real intelligence community that I've ever seen in my life, that I ever could have dreamt for, next to abolishing the CIA, the FBI, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's huge. I'm at a loss. I mean, he never once talked about that on the campaign trail. I don't think he even intended to do it. Let me tell you what I think happened, actually. I think he did intend to try and figure out why the whole system worked against him, because you got to always, whenever you're analyzing Trump's actions, you have to try and put it into his incentive structure. And what's his incentive structure? What makes me look good? What makes me look bad? What makes me more loved? What makes me more hated? And he's like, all right, why was I so hated? And I think this is why he started with the fake news moniker. He starts to try and express to the American people, like, you don't hate me. The news wants you to hate me because they're liars. That was like his rudimentary explanation, and probably his genuine understanding is like, why am I not beloved? I've been loved for 30 years in this country. Americans loved me. Now they hate me? This is weird. It's fake news. Fake news is doing it. But this go around, after the multiple impeachments and assassination attempts and the spying by the FBI and everything else, I think he finally thought to himself, all right, there's got to be resources that are being funneled. I tried to stop it in my first term. I was totally unable to. There has to be an agency that I'm not paying attention to that's actually the fuel to this fire. I still don't even think he thought or knew it was USAID. What I think happened was this. He sixed this Doge entity with Elon on it, and Elon has expressed this actually. He said, the way we have decided on where to focus is we asked for documentation from all of the agencies, and whoever gave us the hardest time in delivering, our receivables, that's who we focused on. And guess who was the least transparent? It was USAID, because it's the funding arm for the State Department and kind of the CIA. So yeah, they were like, Stonewall, we ain't giving you shit. Elon hits up Trump and he's like, yo, I think I found our source code. I really think that's what happened. And then after that, Trump goes, well, then we're going to freeze their funding. We'll just freeze it. And then once you freeze it, you can actually see what continues and what stops. Because as soon as the money dries up, all of the influencers, all of the musicians that they genuinely employ and pay to go and create revolutions all over the world. That's a real thing. I would encourage you to check out the Mike Benz Joe Rogan interview if you want to get some of these details. It's fucking mind.
Destabilize the country.
But it's not just that. They also fund the entire NGO framework to the tune of billions annually that are responsible for, amongst other things, making everybody gay. I'm being a little facetious, but it definitely emphasized the woke mind virus, and it helped to spread that to the rest of the world as well as domestically. But the other thing it did is it funded all of the religious NGOs, Christian, Catholic, Jewish, all of them, to assist migrants in their trek from the third world into not just America, but Europe as well. As I've said before, and I've explained this in the past, but I usually just talked about the NGOs, or I would talk about State Department. I didn't connect that intermediary middleman, which was USAID, the funding source for all this. That's what was really happening, is that we were being robbed to then hand over billions of dollars to USAID, which then handed over billions of dollars to NGOs, which then via guidance from the State Department was funding our own invasion and ultimately our own destruction. And I feel like for the first time, all of the dots have been connected. The entire picture is in front of us, and we all get to look at it. And some people are going to look at it and they're going to say, I can't believe what I'm looking at. I'm going to go back to sleep. And I think another huge percentage of this country is looking at it right now and they're going, this is the worst thing I've ever looked at. I'm mad. And we're going to stop this. And that's what I'm trying to feed off of, that energy, that reform kind of, peaceful revolution energy. That's what we need to capitalize on right now. You cannot let these moments pass, because I've been talking about this stuff for years, but it didn't really have the traction that it does now as a consequence of Elon Musk and Doge bringing all of this information to light and him blasting it out 10 times a day, where he's like, we spend this on this was for that. And everyone's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And me and Mike Benz and other people are like, yeah, this is what we've been talking about. Like, this is what's up. This is why everything's fucked. Okay? So we have a choice right now. Do we look at all of the things that are fucked up because of USAID and just go back to sleep? Or say, oh, we'll just stop it, but like maybe we will, maybe we won't? Or do we get serious as fuck right now because we have an opportunity to save Western civilization? I'm going with the latter. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reverse course on a, as I've said many times, an existential trajectory, which is what we were on, which is ultimately why I voted for Trump. Now, I didn't expect him to fucking do everything that he's done, nor as fast as he's done it. But like, this is almost as much as I could have hoped for. It's almost my dream scenario. I mean, he's openly talking about having Ron Paul audit the Federal Reserve. Elon's saying it multiple times. You got Theo Vaughn, stand-up comic, one of the biggest comics in the country. He's saying it. This is fucking nuts. This is nuts. I mean, if you can just flash back to my attitude 90 to 120 days ago, when it's like, we're right on the precipice of World War III. Trump just got shot. And it's like all of this madness is transpiring. And there's very little optimism. I mean, from my end, at least, like, just for the trajectory of the country. Life still, optimistic. But for the trajectory of things, it was like, this looks fucked. If Kamala Harris gets in there, we are super fucked. You think they're going to negotiate peace with Russia? Absolutely not. You think we're ever going to, have a real election where a distant figure like Donald Trump gets back in? No. Absolutely not. Like, it would have been fucking cemented off. And by the grace of God, man, I really do feel like we dodged a bullet, both literally and metaphorically. And I've just never been more hopeful, like, and I'm certain I'm going to be let down. When Trump talked about owning Gaza, I was let down. That concerned the hell out of me. And there's going to be many things he does that I hate, no doubt about it. But in terms of the positives, Department of Education, poof, gone. USAID, shut it down. This is fucking good shit. Federal Reserve, audited by Ron Paul. Oh, yeah. What? Does anybody feel me on this? Do you feel how special this moment is? I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. I've never got to just express like pure joy to you guys, and I know I'm going to get mocked for just being optimistic or hopeful, but like, damn, dude, this is a real shot, like a real once in a lifetime opportunity, and I'm just going to keep pressuring. I'm going to keep trying to get as much out of this as we possibly can, and I hope you guys join me in that. You never really had a shot before. You do now. They're listening. When he says we're going to own Gaza and we all fire back, fuck that. He'll change. He will. That's how this administration functions. They're the most influenceable administration in your lifetime. Your opinion does matter this go around. Not everything. You're not going to get everything you want, but in terms of having some weight on the scale of the trajectory of things, we have it now. Don't take your finger off the scale. Push harder. Tilt this as hard as you can towards liberty. For instance, I had a tweet that went crazy viral, and I actually explained this on my episode of Dangerous with Top and David earlier today. But I just want to explain my rationale for these things because I think it might be interesting for some of you that are on Twitter and like, why does Clint post things he does, and how does it function, and why does it go viral? Things of that nature, right? So my concern for the longest time has been that it's going to be real hard to get like equal, genuine justice when it comes to these disclosures and seeing who's responsible for what. And like, are we, and especially after Biden pardoned Fauci and his entire family and all these people, it's like, are we actually going to get justice? So my big concern at this point is that, well, we have all of these disclosures that are happening, these deep dive investigations and the finances about USAID and the NGO networks and how this all functions. Are we just going to pretend as if this was a Democrat thing? Are we going to pretend that? Because, if the Mike Johnsons of the world, who, by the way, greenlit all of the billions of dollars that went to Ukraine, all of it, do you think he's going to want to throw himself under the bus when it comes out that maybe there was some kickbacks to those tranches of money that we were shipping off to Ukraine? Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think any of the Republicans that signed off on that stuff are going to want to have real disclosures and real come to Jesus moments when it comes to who was getting paid from all of the corruption and theft in this government. So this is what I said. There's a misconception about Trump supporters. I know it's kind of ridiculous for me to be talking with any sort of authoritative nature on Trump supporters, given that I only became a Trump supporter 4 months ago. But I said there's a misconception about Trump voters that should be put to rest. We aren't just interested. I know it still makes me laugh. We aren't just interested in seeing corrupt Democrats forced out of power. We would actually like to see them prosecuted, along with, and this is the key, this is where I'm setting the narrative frame, along with every Republican swamp monster that sold this country out. All of them. Now, 500,000 views, 56,000 likes. You can laugh it off like, Clint, oh, you're going to pretend like you're some diehard Trump supporter? Yeah, no, I'm not. But I do know Trump supporters, and I do know how they think. And I did vote for him, so I'm not lying. But like, the frame I'm setting there is I want to shift the Overton window from Democrats, bad, corrupt, criminal thieves, to the uniparty, bad, corrupt, criminal thieves. I don't want to just get disclosures and get resignations from these people. I want prosecutions of everybody. Now, everybody that actually committed crimes. I'm not on some like witch hunt here. I just genuinely believe that our government is filled with fucking criminals. And unless you prosecute them, this shit won't stop. So I've been saying this for years. It's not any shift from my perspective, but I'm just trying to popularize it amongst the Trump supporting base, the MAHA thing, to make it more likely that that's the actual outcome we witness. Because if we witness that outcome, it's the ultimate win. It's the ultimate win. Like that's as much as we could hope for. Now, you're not going to get Fauci, but since Fauci has a pardon, you might get him to testify. You might, if you apply enough pressure, you might, to get him to actually explain where the bodies are buried. Why? Why did you do what you did? Who did you do it for? Who paid you? Now, if I'm right about where his funding comes from, he may never speak regardless, even if he's put into prison, because his life may be in jeopardy. Like, that's a distinct possibility. As Anna Paulina Luna just came out yesterday and she said this.
Fox News alert, the House Oversight Committee has just launched a new task force aimed at uncovering the truth behind some of America's biggest mysteries. The task force on the declassification of federal secrets is being led by Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, and they'll be looking into the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Martin Luther King, as well as releasing 9/11 files and Jeffrey Epstein's client list. Up first, the JFK assassination. Luna's confident Lee Harvey Oswald didn't act alone.
Based on what I've been seeing so far, the initial hearing that was actually held here in Congress was actually faulty in the single bullet theory. I believe that there were two shooters, and we should be finding more information as we are able to gain access into the SCIF, hopefully before the files are actually released to the public.
Now, that's kind of a big deal. It's a big deal in the sense that what they're saying is that JFK, who, by the way, yeah, it's at this point, most people doubt the official story, but I think most people still believe that Oswald was the lone shooter. Now, you have a sitting congresswoman saying that she has seen documentation that makes her believe that there was multiple shooters. Whoa, that he did not work alone, but he was also not firing alone. That's a big, big disclosure. And if they actually prove it out, that's revelatory in a sense that, like, you don't go back from that. There's like a before disclosure, after disclosure. Like, you can't go back from that, especially if that disclosure includes that one of the shooters or more were employed by the United States government or intel agencies specifically. If that comes out, my goodness. Now, let me say this. I am not fond of having these task force to deal with disclosures. Just give me the information. Let me read it. Let me see what you have, and let me see what I think happened, because I don't trust any of you, and that includes Miss Paulina Luna. I don't trust you. Sorry. It concerns me that they're going to have her, I don't know, reviewing and deciding what we get to see. Just give it to us. It's been 61 years. Give us the information, for God's sakes. It's not too much to ask. It was our president that got killed. Shouldn't we know who and why? Yeah, we ought to at this point. Jesus Christ. So the fact that it's been hidden has always led me to believe who was behind it was not who we were told, and you can guess who I think was behind it. So I want answers, and I want full disclosure, and I don't want any curation of this information to the public. Let us, the citizen journalists or whatever you want to call us, figure it the fuck out on our own. That would be nice. But this is a step in that direction. Regardless of, its imperfections, at least it's a step. And if we get that answer, and if the general public accepts the fact that, yeah, maybe the United States government was behind it, whoa, big time. So anyways, why do I bring that up? Well, if I'm right about that, if I'm right about what happened to JFK and RFK and MLK and, these other civil rights leaders, well then, Anthony Fauci has to be aware of that too. And Anthony Fauci must know that, as I've said many times, I don't think Fauci was like the ringleader. I don't think he was the top guy that was dictating all of this. I don't think that. But he was the figurehead, and he was the one that was represented to us as being the one who had the most power in our entire medical health establishment. He was, king doctor or whatever. He knows for sure what happened. And he could tell us the truth. But I think also he's probably in major jeopardy, even with this pardon. And I think he was probably given the pardon because he said, hey, I'm going to squeal if you don't give it to me. If you give it to me, I'll never say a word. So my expectation is that he'll never say a word. But that doesn't mean that he won't. That doesn't mean that with enough pressure under this administration, especially if you can pierce that pardon somehow, that he won't. Especially if you threaten him with perjury, if he won't tell the truth, given that he has a pardon and he can't be thrown in prison. Well, then you can hit him with a perjury charge if he won't disclose what he knows. Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? I'm just saying, if you have enough people clamoring for the truth, you might get it. And you might get it from the last place you'd expect it, like the lying scumbag himself, Anthony Fauci. We'll see. I think it's a very, very interesting time to be alive. The most interesting time I've ever lived through. And I'm very optimistic about this year. Now, Doomer Clint has to come back out here for a minute. if I'm right, if this Trump team, this Doge team, is really doing what they say they're doing, they are going to disclose to us so much criminality in our government that I don't know how the government, like the established government, the deep state, can survive it. Like, it'll be so damaging to them, they will be obliterated. So do you think they're just going to accept that fate lying down? Kind of doubt it. If you're the CIA or the FBI or the military industrial complex or a congressional representative that's been in there for 40 years who went from being worth 50 grand to 50 million, do you think you're just going to accept your time in San Quentin? Probably not. Not without a fight. So I am super nervous about extrajudicial means of addressing this, a la JFK. I won't say anything more than that. You know exactly what I'm saying. I am nervous. And I mean, the good news is that I think that after the multiple attempts on Trump's life, he has already reconfigured his security detail. I know Elon's got a crazy security detail too. I think that's our best hope to avoid that, is just an immense security detail that is like world class. Even that is obviously not infallible. So it's gonna require some luck, I think, but it's gonna be the most anxiety inducing 4 years of your life and mine. Because if they were to succeed in that, I don't even want to envision what that will look like or be like, and so I'm not going to. I'm just gonna hope for the best, hope for continued disclosures, hope for like just the genuine aspects of, Trump and Elon and everything else. Like I understand they all have their own incentive structures and they're going to profit and they're going to become more powerful, and like they're getting a lot out of this too. This is not just a purely altruistic maneuver, but I do believe that they have risked a lot, and I do believe that they're risking their lives in taking this path, even if it's just a path to, make themselves, self-aggrandizing and increasing in power and wealth and everything else. Maybe that's all that's driving them to do it. Maybe. I don't think so personally. I think there is a sense of duty that I see, particularly in Elon when he talks about this stuff. I think that his time growing up in South Africa, I don't know when he came over here, but I know that he paid attention to South Africa once he became an American, and he's seen what's transpiring there. And then to have his son, or I think it was his daughter, transition, I don't know, one of his kids transition to feel that loss. I think he's functioning in a way that's very much in alignment with his origin story and his background. That makes it seem sincere to me. Now, can I prove that? No. But his actions speak to someone who's on a mission, who dreams big and takes risks and goes after it in a way that's very dangerous ultimately. But can you get anything truly history making without taking risks, without putting yourself in danger? Not often. And he seems like he's built from that stock, whatever that stock is. And I hope I'm not wrong. I hope he's not just trying to create WeChat and put us into his technocratic gulag. Maybe that's part of it too. But as of now, it looks like he's taken real risks with real benefits to you and I. And as long as that's the case, I'm gonna give him his due. I think it's heroic. I think what Trump has done is heroic. I think what Tulsi and Cash and Bobby have all done is heroic. And I think that we needed heroic action. We needed it now. And we have a chance now. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you are watching this right now on the YT, then you're not going to see the next 2 hours of content. If you're watching this on Rumble or listening, you're going to listen to the premiere episode number 1 of Dangerous RTRDS with myself, David, and Top Lobster, the NDS guys. I think you'll really enjoy it. We go deep on a bunch of this stuff, like deep in different ways. It's obviously, it's dangerous, so it's going to be little spicy, and maybe that's not for everybody. But if you're watching this on YT, I can't put that up over there. So you're going to have to either hop over to Rumble or subscribe to Liberty Lockdown via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else, and you can listen to the premiere. I thought it went great. We just got done recording it a little bit ago. really interesting conversation, and I think you'll enjoy it. So check that out. You can subscribe on YouTube right now, Dangerous RTRDS, and make sure you do leave a comment down below if I got anything wrong. Like, subscribe, and share this around. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for letting me take a week off to collect my thoughts and see why I'm having, I guess, speaker's block as opposed to writer's block. It wasn't really that I had speaker's block. It was just like, what's an interesting angle to talk about this stuff? Like, things are good. It's good stuff. So I just decided I'd come on here and tell you why I think it's good. What a shift from the first 3 years I've been doing this show, where I just got on here and pitched about everything. It's like, oh, this is all fucking awesome. And let's hope it keeps going that way. See you guys soon. Peace.
Told you I'm from Africa. You don't know me. Uptown? No?
Yeah, what you doing up here?
Because I think I was looking for you.
What you looking for me for?
I like you.
You got the wrong door, man.
No.
Yeah.
I got the right person. Maybe it's the wrong address, please.
Yeah, it's the wrong address.
I'm not female. There's a difference between female and woman. Female is just for your pussy, for your dick and money. I'm from Africa. I cook clean, good love, got juicy tight, spicy. But in America, the woman work, they control the man because they work. In Africa, woman doesn't work. Their job is taking care of the man. If a man
This is dangerous. I'm not condemning these people. I'm not saying that they're bad people. I'm saying that they're dumb, okay? You haven't figured out that you're being lied to by this machine yet. You're a fucking idiot, and I can't help you anymore.
Aliens, dollar collapse, demolishing of the deep state. Just because they've given you, as a conspiracy theorist, everything you wanted, don't go on a victory tour just yet. And strengthen your relationship with God.
I know that we're almost in World War III. I just don't care that he retarded. And everything above that is a disrespect to God.
I'm somebody that thought I could fix this, and I'm starting to think about having to eat my neighbors.